June 26, 2010. An undercover FBI agent sits across from a red-haired woman in Manhattan and hands her a fake United States passport. He tells her to deliver it to another Russian spy. She takes it. She says, "Of course." She walks out. And then she does something the FBI never planned for. She buys a burner phone, calls her father in Moscow, and asks him to check whether the assignment is real. It isn't, because the man who gave it to her doesn't work for Russia. He works for the FBI. Within hours, the Bureau scrambles to arrest 10 people across 4 states before Moscow can warn them. 10 Russian sleeper agents, people who've been living as Americans for years, some for decades, raising children, holding jobs, attending PTA meetings. The FBI has known about every single one of them for nearly 10 years, and in all that time, they haven't arrested a single one. So how does that happen? How does the most powerful law enforcement agency on Earth watch an enemy spy network operate inside its own borders for a full decade and do nothing? And what finally forced them to move? To understand what the FBI was up against, you need to see what they were looking at. And what they were looking at from the outside was absolutely nothing suspicious. A couple in suburban New Jersey, beige 2-story colonial, 31 Marquette Road, 2 daughters, ages 9 and 11. The father told neighbors he was a stay-at-home dad. The mother worked at a Manhattan accounting firm, earning 6 figures, managing money for a venture capitalist who happened to be a top fundraiser for Hillary Clinton. They mowed the lawn. They walked the dog. They sometimes showed up at summer block parties. A newer agent in Arlington, Virginia, drove a Mercedes S500, spoke Russian to his girlfriend, used a laptop in restaurants to send encrypted messages to a car parked outside with Russian diplomatic plates. And Anna Chapman arrived in Manhattan in 2009, called herself the CEO of a real estate company. She bought leggings at Macy's and tried on hats while transmitting coded data from her laptop to a Russian official driving past a coffee shop on 47th Street. These were illegals, spies operating without diplomatic cover, no embassy job, no immunity, no safety net. If caught, Moscow disowns them. They were part of a program run by the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service and the successor to the KGB, the Soviet Union's feared intelligence and secret police service that was dissolved when the USSR collapsed. The SVR inherited the KGB's overseas mission, espionage operations outside Russian borders. The FBI called its investigation Operation Ghost Stories because several of these agents had stolen the identities of dead people to build their legends. A legend is a spy's fabricated identity, not just a fake name, an entire constructed biography. Birthplace, education, family history, all of it invented and backstopped with forged documents. And one couple had built the deepest legend of all. In the early 1980s, 2 history students met in the Siberian city of Tomsk. KGB spotters selected them. They entered a training program that lasted years, rebuilding their language, their mannerisms, their reflexes, until they could pass as an ordinary Canadian couple. In 1987, they left the Soviet Union separately. They staged a chance meeting in Canada and pretended to fall in love. Their entire marriage, from the outside, was a first date that never ended. One of them earned an MBA in Paris. The other got into the Harvard Kennedy School, Harvard's graduate school for public policy, a pipeline to senior government positions, exactly the kind of access Moscow wanted its agents to cultivate. They had 2 sons, American-born. The boys had no idea. Not a single word of Russian was ever spoken in their home. And once the kids were in bed, the mother crept into a back room and decrypted radio messages from Moscow. This is the depth of cover the FBI was up against. People who had been pretending to be someone else for longer than some FBI agents had been alive, and that's why surveillance alone could never close the case. Because the FBI's source, a man named Potayev, had told them everything. Colonel Alexander Potayev, deputy head of Directorate S inside the SVR, the division that ran the illegals. He'd been recruited by the FBI during a posting in New York. Recruited means he flipped. He kept his SVR post but secretly passed intelligence to the Americans, making him a double agent inside the very program he was supposed to protect. He was disgruntled. His request to extend his stay in America had been denied. His pension was being cut. The prospect of returning to Moscow was unappealing, so he started talking. Puteyev gave the FBI the real names, the cover names, the verbal recognition codes, the communication methods, everything. But knowledge is not evidence, and evidence the FBI had. What they didn't have was a crime. In May 2004, the FBI tracks the network's paymaster, a man operating under the name Christopher Metzos, to the Forest Hills train station in Queens. He walks up a staircase carrying an orange bag. A Russian official walks down carrying an identical orange bag. They pass. The bags switch hands. The whole thing takes seconds. The FBI photographs it. 2 men, 2 bags, 1 staircase. But it proves nothing prosecutable. 2 strangers carrying similar shopping bags in a New York subway station isn't a federal offense. The FBI follows the money trail to a rural rest stop outside Wurtsboro, New York, where they believe Metzos buried a cache of cash in a field. They install hidden cameras, and they wait. For over 2 years, those cameras roll on an empty field. Then in June 2006, a man drives to Wurtsboro, walks into the field, and digs. The FBI captures every frame. 2 years of patience for 60 seconds of footage, and it still isn't enough to arrest anyone. Meanwhile, back on the streets of Manhattan, Chapman is running a different kind of operation. On at least 10 occasions between January and June of 2010, FBI surveillance catches her communicating through a private wireless network with a Russian government official. She sits in a coffee shop. A car drives by. Data transfers through the air. The FBI calls it steganography, hiding secret data inside ordinary-looking files, embedding coded messages in the pixels of a vacation photo posted to a public website, invisible unless you know exactly where to look. The FBI even found the software the SVR built for this, custom-made, not commercially available, activated by pressing Ctrl-Alt-E and entering a 27-character password. The password was written down on a piece of paper. The FBI found it. But even this, all of this, the photographs, the cameras, the intercepted transmissions, the cracked encryption, it painted a picture of espionage without constituting a prosecutable act of espionage. The agents hadn't stolen classified documents. They were talent spotters, scouts. Their job was to identify Americans in positions of power who might one day be recruited to spill secrets. Moscow's ultimate aim was probably to cultivate a source who could provide real-time intelligence on what the president's inner circle was thinking, and the woman in New Jersey was getting dangerously close. Her firm's client was a personal friend of Hillary Clinton. The SVR sent a message calling that target very interesting and urged her to build the relationship beyond work. By early 2010, every pressure point the FBI has been managing for a decade starts compressing at once. The Obama administration is pursuing a diplomatic reset with Russia. President Obama and President Medvedev have just shared burgers at Ray's Hell Burger in Arlington, Virginia. Arrests would be a political grenade. The White House reaches a compromise. Move, but only after Medvedev's visit to avoid embarrassment. Puteyev's position inside the SVR is deteriorating. His posting extension was denied years ago. He's back in Moscow, and the SVR is beginning to prepare lie detector tests to find a mole. Every day Puteyev sits inside that building, the probability that he's discovered inches upward. Several illegals are planning international travel. The man in New Jersey is booking flights to France, possibly Russia. The Harvard couple wants to travel abroad with their son. Chapman herself plans to fly to Moscow in mid-July. If any of them leave the country, they're gone. No extradition, no prosecution. A decade of work evaporated. And then there's Chapman's trajectory. She's networking aggressively, getting closer to people with genuine policy access. The FBI watches her rise and calculates the cost of inaction. By early 2010, the FBI has 10 years of surveillance, thousands of hours of footage, and a source inside the SVR confirming the network is real. The case file is enormous, but Potayev is being recalled to Moscow, a city where his betrayal could be discovered at any moment. The FBI's most important asset is about to walk into a building full of people trained to find traitors. The FBI begins planning arrests in mid-June. But to arrest the illegals, they need a prosecutable act. To manufacture one, they need to approach agents in person. And approaching agents in person means entering a world where one wrong move alerts Moscow, which burns Potayev before he can escape. The plan: undercover FBI agents will pose as SVR handlers and assign the illegals tasks. Tasks that, once accepted and acted upon, constitute federal crimes. The centerpiece is Chapman, an undercover agent using a recognition code that only Potayev and Chapman's real handler would know, contacts her on Saturday, June 26. He identifies himself as Roman from the Russian consulate. They speak Russian at first, then switch to English to draw less attention. Chapman is cautious. "I need more information about you before I can talk," she says. Roman tells her he knows she's headed to Moscow in 2 weeks, but before that, he has a task for her: deliver a fake passport to another agent. Chapman asks, "You're positive no one is watching?" She accepts the passport, the undercover's parting words: "Your colleagues in Moscow, they know you're doing a good job." She walks out. The FBI has its prosecutable act on camera. For the first time in 10 years, the timeline is in the Bureau's hands. Then Chapman buys a new cell phone, 2 telephone cards. She calls her father in Moscow. She calls another contact in New York. Both tell her the same thing: don't deliver the passport. Turn it in to police. Get out of the country. One phone call, that's all it took to turn a controlled operation into a race. The FBI learns almost immediately that Chapman has contacted Moscow. The SVR has no record of any assignment because the order came from the FBI. If Moscow warns the network, 10 agents scatter across 4 states overnight. If Potayev is still inside SVR headquarters when the alert reaches them, he's trapped. The arrest timeline compresses from weeks to hours. 3 days before the arrests, Potayev grasps the danger. He asks his bosses for an impromptu vacation. He purchases a rail ticket to Minsk using his brother's passport. From Minsk, he crosses into Ukraine, acquires a fake passport, and makes it to a CIA apartment in Frankfurt. He texts his wife from Belarus, his wife left behind in Moscow with no warning, a single message: "Try to take this calmly. I'm not going away for a while, I'm going away forever. I did not want to, but I had to." On June 27th, the FBI executes simultaneous arrests: New Jersey, Boston, Arlington, Yonkers, Manhattan, 10 people in custody by morning. Chapman walks into the 1st Precinct police station in New York to turn in the passport, just as her father advised. The FBI is waiting. She's arrested on the spot. The paymaster, Metsos, is grabbed separately in Cyprus 2 days later. A local court sets bail at $30,000. Police drive him to the bank to withdraw it. He checks into the Akalios Hotel, hangs a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door, takes a shower, and vanishes. His bed is never slept in. A laptop he carried self-destructs its own files. He is never seen again. July 9th, 2010, Vienna International Airport. A spy swap, a negotiated exchange where arrested agents are traded between governments on neutral ground. 2 planes park nose to tail at a remote section of the tarmac. A small bus shuttles passengers between them. 10 Russian agents go east. 4 Western assets held in Russian prisons come west, including Sergei Skripal, who will be poisoned in England 8 years later. The biggest swap since 1986. Chapman lands in Moscow and becomes a celebrity. She joins the youth wing of Putin's party, gets a television show. The couple from New Jersey, their daughters born and raised American, learn for the first time that their parents are Russian intelligence officers. The sons of the Harvard couple fly to Moscow and meet a grandmother they didn't know existed. One of them later writes in an affidavit, "I am first and foremost Canadian." There are 3 layers here worth pulling apart. The first is the decade of patience. The FBI chose to watch rather than act, accumulating evidence while accepting compounding risk. Every year the investigation ran, the chance of Potayev being discovered grew. Every year, the illegals got closer to people who mattered. The FBI was playing a game where the cost of acting too early was losing a case, and the cost of waiting too long was losing a source. They chose to wait. For 10 years. That's a bet most organizations would never make. The second layer is the manufactured crime. This was the FBI's answer to a decade-long dilemma. If you can't use your source in court without burning him, you manufacture a crime he has no part in. Potayev told them who the spies were. The fake passport would prove it, without him ever entering a courtroom. When the FBI finally moved, they didn't wait for the illegals to make a mistake. They created the mistake. They posed as Russian handlers and assigned illegal tasks. This only works if the target behaves predictably. Accept the passport, deliver it, get arrested, clean, simple. Which brings us to the third layer. Chapman didn't behave predictably. Her instinct to verify was, by every measure, good tradecraft. You don't accept orders from someone you've never met without checking. That's basic operational security, and it's the exact behavior that detonated the FBI's timeline. The FBI controlled this operation for 10 years. The moment they stepped into the room, someone else made a move they didn't expect, and everything accelerated. That's the lesson buried in this whole story. In any sustained operation, surveillance, negotiation, undercover work, the most dangerous moment is when you shift from watching to acting, because acting introduces variables you can no longer control. Potayev is convicted of state treason in absentia, 25 years. A Kremlin official tells a Russian newspaper that an assassination plan is in the works. Russian officials and Vladimir Putin publicly denounced him as a traitor. Reports in 2016 claiming he had died in the United States turned out to be false. He was last linked to Florida. His current whereabouts are unknown. And in the end, the SVR found a cheaper method. An FBI counterintelligence chief later said something that reframes the entire case. We watched a sleeper cell of 10 people for 10 years that didn't come close to the impact of a few thousand ads and posts on social media. A decade of work, billions of rubles invested by Moscow, childhoods built on lies, marriages that were intelligence operations, surpassed almost overnight by a laptop and an internet connection.